The premise of Endless Winter Paleo-Americans is that you are a Paleo-American. You're cold. You just want to establish some nice housing for your frozen tribe, maybe get a little meat on the side, which is different from the Deuce Bigelow board game, and smash together a whole bunch of things to create a life for yourself, because life is complicated. Life has area control. Life has deck building. Life has worker placement. Well, it bills itself as worker placement, but really it's action selection. And life is a mess of choices that will all lead to points for your tribe. This is Endless Winter, and this was one of the sort of large hits of 2022. And so I finally got it to the table enough to talk about it, and I'm going to tell you if it's worth your time right now. But first off, I do want to show just how exciting this production copy is. This is a retail copy. This is nothing more than a retail copy, and yet it comes stuffed to the brim with incredibly quality components, which is great. It really is. This is a game that for like its $60 price feels incredibly premium. It has dual layer player boards, one for each person, and the fact that you can just hand out these game trays chock full with everything that your player needs to set up, and then have another pretty good storage system, although you see this was on the side, and so some things have shifted. Not too bad, though. Sometimes with vertical storage, I always store my games vertically. What the damn hell is that? Did it get caught under the game tray? I may have spoke too soon. That's a travesty. But that's okay, because the back of your cards, well, they matter, but they may not matter as much as you might think. So let's take a quick look at how to play the game. There are a lot of moving parts, and I'm not going to cover everything, but we are going to cover enough to give you a sense on if this game is right for you, and that's going to be going right now. And first thing you might notice when you look at sort of a general setup over here is that this is a table hog. I've laid out things to talk about the various different mechanics of the game. Oh, there we go, somewhat better. It's a little bit more set up. I'll zoom in on everything as we go through, but I wanted to give you a general overlay of the amount of space that this game can take. And let me tell you, we're still not even at the full amount, because we also have this deck of cards that is filled with different cards that you can add to your deck. This is really upsetting to me, just very frustrating. But we'll squish it down with something. Various cards that you can add to your deck throughout the game, because as I mentioned, deck building is a key component. That also needs to have a space on the table where it can be sort of overlaid. But here are the basics of the game. Each of you is going to have three workers that you can place on the board to choose your main actions. Your main actions, which are located in these four columns here. This is where the bulk of the decision-making space is going to take, because it is through these actions that you get to do various things which will improve your deck, improve your tribe standing, and let you expand out all over the regular board. So what sort of things do we have? We have the people-pleasing space, where if you put your person over here, you generally will get to add a number of cards to your deck. These are kind of the standard 5 that you get to choose from, and they can improve your starting deck, which only kind of starts with basic characters, basic tribemen who really don't do a heck of a lot. That's kind of how you will improve your deck. Over here, you can also improve your deck with specialized crafts. Now, these crafts are different in terms of they're generally worth potentially more points, and they can do more complicated things. These are unique cards that nobody else will have access to, and therefore they're a little bit more, or therefore they're a little bit better. They're also a little bit more expensive. You can also use this action to get these sort of permanent goals that when you put them onto your dual layered player board, you then get to score them every round. Over here, we have what deals with this whole land mass area in that you can take these little huts off of your own board and add it to the center or move them from the center, expanding across the map, hoping that you might create a triangle of land mass so that you can then replace it with an even bigger city which touches all the corners and plays a little bit of an area control game, which gives you bonuses throughout the game. And then finally, over here, we have the hunting track, which allows you to play in this little set collection game over here with the various animals, which will be worth points at the end of the game. Or you can use those animals for food, like this sweet little woolly rhino, who can get you 6 food if you kill them. But if you kill them, of course, you don't have them in your tribe. They're not pets, they're meat. And so while you've taken the 6 food and gone up on your little food track, sorry to tell you, you can't keep a steak as a pet. Now, the game takes place over 4 rounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going to have 3 actions on every round. It doesn't seem like a lot, but because every action that you select has multiple parts, sometimes basically 3 different things that you can do, it ends up spiraling quite quickly. And the only real aspect of the worker placement is because there are these one-time bonuses that you get if you're the first person to choose an action for that round. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, you're pretty much unstoppable. You can't really be blocked. Even in this area control thing, you're moving around, there are so many different places where you can put your big old cities that it doesn't take too much to block someone out. And if you do, they can always just kind of move over to the next area. That's a very general overview. Let me specify that again. It is a very general overview. I haven't even talked about you going up on these different cult tracks, which are important again for endgame points. And I haven't even talked about you expanding your board and putting different megaliths down to gain one-time bonuses as well as gain points if you happen to create structures, because that's also a thing you can do. This is a game all about points. And if you like your games to be streamlined, this isn't the game for you. It isn't. This is sort of pioneering the era of mashing everything together for those who have so many games that one mechanic doesn't satisfy them anymore, but they need 5 to focus on all at the same time. And that might be you. That might be you. It certainly is me, I think. I think I'm also kind of the target audience for this style of game because I really like a lot of moving parts and I like thinking, okay, this is going to get me some stuff and this is going to get me something. And it's not completely clear until the end of the game who's even ahead or whose strategy is really holding water. My microphone was off, and so I don't know where I was. But I believe I was talking about cards. The crux of this game comes not only with the deck building, but the way that Endless Winter makes deck building a little bit different. Because in a normal deck building game, you have your hand of cards, you shuffle them up, you have 5 cards, you draw 5 cards, and you use these cards to do things on your turn. And then if you don't use them or whatever, you discard them, and then you draw 5 more from your discard onto your next round. But the key with this is since there are only 4 rounds, it needs to be a little bit more elevated and a little bit quicker pace, because generally speaking, the cards that you get don't go into your discard pile like a normal deck builder game. They tend to go right into your hand. And so if I'm spending in this action, for example, I'm putting my chief here to take this action, which allows me for 1 tool and 1 labor, 1 little piece of effort. I get to take new cards and put it into my deck. The key here is that you're actually getting to take cards and putting them directly into your hand. And now I've just turned a labor and a tool into a labor and a half. But that's not all, because not only does it go into my hand, these cards also will have abilities during the Eclipse Phase. And so at the end of each round, once all players have put all 3 of their workers out there, they've chosen 3 actions that they want to take, any cards that are left over in their hand can do 2 things. They can stay around for the next round. Done. You want to keep it in your hand? Great. Or they can activate their little Eclipse Phase. Down here, you see during the Eclipse, you gain 1 shaman point over here. During the Eclipse, you get to take another person and then put that one into your discard. During the eclipse, you get 2 tools of resources. And so not only are players competing to see how much they can utilize the cards in their hands and impact these different actions and use them effectively, they're also competing to see how many cards they can hold on to so that they can win the Eclipse phase, because you also get to be first player in the next round if you win the Eclipse phase. You also get additional bonuses if you have put the most effort into the Eclipse phase, as well as the really powerful abilities. And I think that's what makes this game pretty interesting from like a hand management and deck building idea, is that the cards you are getting are going directly into your hand and therefore affecting things in a different way. Also in the Eclipse over here, that's when this area control comes into play, and you get the bonuses on these tiles if you have the most strength basically in each one of these areas. And so that cycle feels really different from a normal deck builder game, which is good because there's so much that you have to do in a really limited time. If this seems like a lot, it is. And for some people, I think it will be too much, but surprisingly, I've played this with gamers who are really new to gaming. I'm out on a theater contract in Nova Scotia right now. I'm not in my normal studio, and I've been playing games with my cast, who some of them are pretty big gamers, and some, this is their first introduction to gaming. I am their first introduction into board gaming. I'm saying, great, you're going to play all the games that I want to review, and you're going to like it. And so what I really found exciting about playing this, but the last game that I played was a 4-person game with 2 people who I would say are not in the tabletop hobby, and then 2 people, myself included in that tally, of people who are more interested in the tabletop hobby. And even though all of these mechanics were brand new to them, they really enjoyed the game. I think it helps when we have such gorgeous art and such gorgeous production design. They were fascinated with the pieces. They loved the little game trays that everything came in. The production value in this game is really off the charts. I have to say that over and over again. I think you get a great value of game in here just from like a component standpoint. Very satisfying to play. And then from a mechanic standpoint, I was worried, and I kind of forgot about how labor intensive this could be for people who aren't really indoctrinated into the board game hobby. This is a game, like I said, for people who have too many games on their shelf and they want to stick 5 of them together and make it doing a little bit of everything. Because if you're doing a little bit of everything, you can never get bored. But this was still a hit with people who had never played a deck builder before, and then who thought this was the norm for deck builders. And then when I introduced them to a regular deck builder, they thought, "Oh, I don't get to keep the cards in my hand." And this kind of set the stage for that. And what I really appreciated is that even though there were a bunch of moving parts, there's never too much of one thing to get overwhelming, which is nice. It's really nice that it can have that effect. Of course, but I'm operating with a fairly small sample size, but it was still really nice to see. And I think part of the reason of that is I think this game varies decently depending upon the player count. And so I first played this as a 2-player game, and nothing really changes other than the amount of tiles that you have over here and the different orientation of this one up here as well. It's flipped around in a different way to make building on top of yourself not as easy in a 4-player game, so that more people have to do it. And you draw like slightly less animals into the pool. But other than that, not a whole lot changes from the game itself when you're playing at a 2-player or when you're playing at a 4-player. And I found the 4-player to be a lot more interesting than a 2-player game because of this action selection idea. In a 2-player game, it really felt like, okay, I take this one track so I can get the extra special bonus, and then my opponent will take the next track to get an extra special bonus. And then I'll take one of the 2 remaining tracks to get the extra special bonus, and then my opponent will take the last track to get the extra special bonus, and then we'll all have one turn with one character to do something that we actually want to do. Because the potential of leaving the bonuses open for your opponent in a 2-player just felt too severe. In a 4-player, we kind of all picked our thing and got the bonus, and then you have a little bit more freedom, which I really appreciated it. I also found that the area control aspect in a 4-player game was significantly more exciting because I didn't care about tying on some of these. I said, "Yeah, you and I can tie, that's great. We'll both get 2 meat, and we'll be ahead of those other 2 dummies," right? A so the little tweaks of that I feel are also better. I also think this sort of cult track is more exciting as well. You can see at the end of the game, depending upon the number of people who are playing, you get more points for burying more people. So there's a way to kind of trash cards in this game to thin your deck, and the best person gets 15 points, and the second best person gets 10 points, and then the third and fourth best person gets 6 points. And I found this competition and this track and vying for those points to be much more exciting in a 4-player game as well. Now, of course, with a 4-player game, you're going to extend the time that it takes to play the game fairly significantly. Of course, it depends on the people who you're playing with. I of course, was playing with new players, but there is a lot going on. And just thinking about all those different aspects, especially for your first few games, until you know what everything even does, it can be overwhelming. And so I think my hesitancy, this is a style of game that I would like to play more at a 2-player level because I would rather that sort of head to head, but I think it kind of works better at that 4-player level because of the difference in competition for stuff. This feels, because there are so many avenues, it feels like you want to explore different things and go down the same path with someone and then hope that the other choices that they make differentiates you enough. Whereas in a strictly 2-player game, it's just head to head. If I'm taking something, I'm denying it from you. And that's not necessarily the style of game that I want from it. And so it was really nice. I actually really appreciated playing this at 4 players. I haven't played it at 3. I can see there being a little bit of an issue, or maybe more fighting for the Eclipse because of these bonuses. I mean, also too, not every time people felt it was more beneficial to leave the bonuses open, and it was fine. We were all relatively close in points, but I just felt like the balance of pursuing different things felt more open in a 4-player game than it did in a 2-player game. Some other minor critiques, I felt like the hunting might have felt a bit too powerful. That's a heavy focus on hunting is what I did to dominate most of my games, and when I wanted to pursue other strategies, I felt like I still needed to get pulled into the hunting game because you can get so many points from it. So that's another thing to consider. I also find with the unique cards in your deck that you can get, these don't, they end up being pretty significant, but like they don't play as much of a factor as perhaps I would like it, or they don't create that much more uniqueness of feel in your deck. The same thing with these little chieftain cards. Everybody gets a random chief card who's basically the best at excelling in one thing. Anytime they go to that thing, they can get, depending upon what side you've randomly flipped over, they can get either some tools or some meat anytime you go to the thing, except for one of them who lets you trade things or trade another thing. The asymmetry didn't feel that asymmetric to me. So if you're looking for like real asymmetry in your games that develops, I don't feel like that necessarily happens in this deck building aspect of things. But I'm really blown away by the production quality. I can't speak enough about how impressed I am that this is just the base retail version, that they include lovely storage and organizers in their actual game. Even the care of putting in art on the inside of the box, it's just like lovingly created. You can tell this has been cared for and put into practice by people who love board gaming and really want to elevate it. And I understand the amount of praise it has gotten. I haven't tried any of the expansions, and honestly, when you got a game like this that's throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it, I don't really feel like I need it. But I am surprised at how much more I enjoyed this in a 4-player experience than I did in a 2-player experience. And I just think it's because it feels a lot more open. Like I said, I much prefer these sort of heavier Euro games to be in a 2-player version, because then I get, more time on my turn and less time with the downtime. But I didn't mind the downtime as much because I got to appreciate everybody's sort of spreading strategy, and that was fun to witness. So yeah, all in all, I'm pretty positive on this game. I think calling it a worker placement hybrid does it a disservice. It's really not a worker placement. It is an action selection hybrid. And I think if you like that idea of blocking your opponents as well, there's not a lot that you can do to block your opponents. The main blocking happens by somebody taking the hunting action first and just buying all the hunting, making it more annoying for you to go hunting, because then you got to spend time uncovering things before you can take them and slaughter them for your own. But I think what it boils down to is that all the mini games in this game feel fun. I like this area control mini game. I think going in here early yields you a lot of nice resource generation. I like the idea of resource generation. I like that you can use your resources, your little, your meat track especially, you can see these little hands on it. If you don't have the cards in your hand, but you want to use actions, you can move your meat down, and every time you pass a hand, it's like you're using that for an action on the main board, which I think is really neat. I like racing up on this track, especially on the side here, because the distinction feels pretty meaningful, even though I suppose it's a difference of 5 to 9 points, but that sort of thing feels significant, right? And I like the immediate feedback that a lot of actions take you. There's also a chance that you can get really screwed over and you can't take actions if you misplay, and finding out creative ways of trying to get around that is potentially interesting, or could be potentially frustrating. There was, early on, I used all my axes and I forgot that I wanted to use my axes on, more things. You need axes to do the main things in 3 of these cases. And if you don't have the axes, you're just screwed. And I liked coming up with a solution for that, but I like that I came up with a solution for that. And if I hadn't, I would have been very frustrated and would have wasted most of my turn. There's also a spot on your board that you can always put people, which allows you just to draw a card, hopefully to give you more resources. But I found the deck building aspect and the worker placement aspect to be really not as advertised as your typical things of that area. I found them more akin to card management and action selection if you're somebody who deals in mechanics and that way of thinking. But overall, I mean, I'm positive on it. Again, to recap, it's a mishmash of stuff. If you like your games to be streamlined and focused, this isn't the game for you. But if you like to have a little bit of everything, and that idea of scooping up things and dabbling in different almost genres, it feels exciting to you with a great emphasis on production value, then this is one that I would check out. For me, it gets a seal of approval. I think this is definitely a good game. I love the production value. It's like a 4 out of 5 for me. I like it a lot, would be happy to play it anytime somebody suggested it, and it's one that I'll want to play or will request personally to play every so often when I'm in the mood for it, right? That's kind of what that 4 out of 5 means in actual language. So hopefully that gave you a good sense of the positives and the negatives. Drop any questions that you have down below. I'll be happy to answer them. As always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Chris George, and I do not have a catchphrase. And honestly, I barely have a table big enough to play this sprawling game. Well, this takes up about as much space as like a rising sun does. And that should tell you something. It's a lot, but for the right person, definitely could be worth it. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye. Oh, you can still see me there. Goodbye. Ooh, no, not goodbye. If you're still here, I want to give a huge shout out to one of my patrons, Prodigy. Thanks for sending this my way to try. I talked about it wanting to try it. It hadn't hit that well with him, and so he's like, you know what? I'll just send it to Chris's way to try out. So huge thanks. That was so kind and generous of you, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And so I just want to say thank you again for sending this my way. I'm consistently touched by the generosity of the board gaming community, and you all rock. Shout out to you. I'll see you all in the next one.